an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 41, The Abyss. In this episode, we have got a real fight between Ed and Kimblee. Ed is impaled. Really, truly was worried about him. I didn't think he was going to die, but this felt like a very, very intense fight in a way the others didn't. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very, very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Hi, Max. What's going on? Oh my God. So Be More in the chat says, the camera is at a different angle and everything is wrong. What is life? Is there meaning in existence? Everything is a lie. Be More. I got a second monitor. So I've had to shift this computer over, and honestly, I meant to use this today and have the show playing on the monitor, but I completely forgot to hook it up because I'm also using it with my Switch. So hopefully Friday I will remember, and then I will have this cool kind of seamless experience where I don't have to jump from one tab to another. You guys convinced me. I needed it also for the Switch. Full disclosure. But you were the ones who put the idea of a second monitor into my head when I was complaining about this. I think it was this audience, or else it was One Piece. So thanks to you guys for helping me out with coming up with a plan. And thanks to Candace, who actually donated some money and helped me pay for the monitor. What's up, Candace, if you're out there? So anyway, I will try that next week. But I'm sorry that everything is all different. It's fun to see that people notice that, though, because I mentioned it last episode and nobody knew what I was talking about, or the first episode of the day. Anyway, okay. So this episode, it feels like we're really starting to come to the crescendo of the plot as it has been right before we hit a place where everything is going to start to change. So I'm really interested to see if I'm right about that, because there's just a vibe between Ed getting injured the way he is and Al starting to get somehow pulled toward the void, that it seems okay, we're at episode 41. There's 64 episodes, I think. This is around the time, 2/3 of the way through, when you start to really see things ratchet up and begin to get answers on some of the long-running questions to lead towards, so now that you know all of that, this is where we have to go and this is what we have to do. And the episode begins, we are with our friends in the tunnels, the mine shafts. And we've got the two guys who had turned out to be Chimera. I called two other guards Chimera last episode. And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't them. It was these other two guys. No. Turns out all four of them are Chimera. I was right. I just didn't know I was right. But it does explain, because that guy had a crazy face. And I was like, this seems like they should be Chimera. But they're down in the mine shafts, and it's May, Winry, Dr. Marco, the two Chimera guys, and Scar, and I think there's one, and Al is separate because they run up into him later. But it's Yoki. That's who the other one is. Sorry, Yoki. You started to grow on me, so I didn't mean to forget about you. But what I found surprising here, guys, is that I really thought Pride was going to wind up being a factor in these tunnels, and they just leave. And Pride never turns up at all. No appearance. I thought for sure that was what we were getting set up. It was just like, it felt very much like we were being shown, and maybe they'll wind up back in the tunnels and this will be a thing again. But I just was so surprised that we don't even get a hint of him like noticing them. There doesn't have to be a full attack, but I thought at least we would like get the thing with the eyes and the teeth and see that he was like looking at them and around at all. No, it seems like the whole purpose to this like underground scene at all is for them to stumble across the sticks of dynamite that they find, because otherwise they pretty much are able to like find their way out, and that's really the only consequence to them coming down here that seems like it's going to be significant at all. And I love that May picks one up and then doesn't realize like what it is until Dr. Marco is like, that's dynamite. And then she says something like, take it from me, take it from me, take it from me. But Yoki off to the side is looking at the dynamite and says, it's soaking wet. It wouldn't go off even if we wanted it to. And then there's a whole thing later with Ed. And guys, I am going to tell you right now, I don't know what the fuck was what I was getting from that scene. Don't tell me now. I will get there. But I'm just forewarning you. I feel like I missed some. And I watched this episode twice, just to give myself a little bit of defense here. So Scar interrupts and is basically like, well, all of you stop looking at the dynamite. We have to figure out where we're going and what to do, because all of these tunnels are basically a maze, and I'm not sure we're heading in the right direction. So then we cut to Miles, and Miles and Ed are talking to two other soldiers, and he is telling these guys, we can't take any risks with Kimblee and his men, so the first chance you get, take out all three of them. And Ed is like really alarmed by this. He's on a team that looks like they are just prepared to be straight up murderers. And we know that Ed is not comfortable with this. Now, here's the thing. There's a whole theme later on in this episode about having mercy on people. And it's the sort of thing that I don't see the same way that I used to. And that is not to say that I am unmerciful. I'm just saying I'm slightly less merciful. And there's an aspect of that I don't love about myself. I feel like when Miles expresses envy over the fact that these two brothers who are young, that they haven't seen like the hideous things that can happen, they are still clinging to these ideals that feel a little bit childish. I get what he means by saying, I wish I still felt that way sometimes, But anyway, Ed being like really conscious of the fact that he's gone out of his way many times to not kill people, and that he may wind up having no say in whether or not this happens is really bothering him. And he gets in an argument over it with Miles. He's like, these two guys, you may feel this way about Kimblee. And even that, he doesn't really want to he's like, we should take Kimblee prisoner. But these two guys, they may just be manipulated by Kimblee. They may not be Team Kimblee because they agree with anything that he's doing. And Ed turns out to be correct. These dudes are first of all, they were turned into Chimera also. And so they're similarly being isolated from any friends or family they used to have. And also, Kimblee winds up totally ditching them. And essentially, he doesn't try to kill them, but he doesn't give a shit that they're going to be killed. And that pretty much shatters their loyalty to him. But that comes a bit later. Miles says, we can't take such a risk on a possibility. And Ed says, and yet you're still willing to kill them for one. I understand what he means. Basically, like, just this little shadow of a doubt. And you're willing to take 2 lives, even if you're not sure. You know, and it does seem like you haven't even tried to engage these guys yet. Like, saying that we just can't keep them alive because it's too dangerous. Have you tried, like, dealing with them in a way that's not just sneaking up on them and bashing them over the head kind of thing, you know? Like, you don't have any idea, and maybe there is a way that you can have a conversation and find out where they stand with all of this. It's unclear how much they even know about what Kimblee is trying to do, but I think they must know quite a bit because they aren't really that surprised about the discovery of a Philosopher's Stone at the end of the episode. But anyway, so Ed says this isn't like it was with General Raven. There might be another way. Now that I thought was kind of interesting. Why does General Raven's situation, why was that so clearly it's fine to kill him? I'm not sure, because, like, not to say that Ed is even saying it was fine. Probably Ed would say, I'm trusting General Armstrong's judgment on it. But it really does seem like he thinks that he has some information that makes it understandable they took him out the way that they did. And I'm not entirely certain that was the only way to deal with things. You know, really, what the purpose that it served was to get him out of the way so that Armstrong could, like, step in. But they could also have imprisoned him and I think gotten the same result. And everybody could say he was dead, and that would be the rumor. And because it was rumors that led to her getting called in to speak to the Fuhrer anyway. So I don't know. I just don't think it was necessarily an unavoidable thing to kill Raven either. And I found it surprising that Ed sort of offhand mentions it like it's an exception and it was no big deal. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there and see if you guys had any opinions on that. But this dude, Miles, is not here for any of Ed waffling on this. He's just like, dude, you know what the rules are like out here. And the minute that you start showing mercy to these guys, one of your friends or you are going to get killed. We aren't going to be sloppy. This is just how it's going to be. And as they're walking down the hall, Ed is left behind. The guys are talking about, it's weird how he's so naive. He joined the army and thinks that he's not going to have to kill anyone. And one of the guys says, I guess I used to think the same thing. And Miles says, he's smiling and says, so did I. But once you've lived through the things we have, you learn some stuff. Like sometimes killing someone isn't as hard as letting them live. That, I thought, was very revealing. That doesn't have anything to do with whether it's right or wrong, or the consequences of it are going to be positive or negative. It's harder. That's all about you, the person holding the gun. And that feels very different to me. It's not like he isn't talking about the ultimate, like the balance of pros and cons and, you know, taking one life for the sake of many. It's not even like a philosophical debate. It's genuinely just about what I can handle, what I want, really, in the end. And he says, I guess they like to go against the grain, and in a way, I envy their conviction. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I understand the appeal of writing your main character as somebody who's, like, really not interested in killing. And I respect it, especially for a show, you know, that was geared towards a younger audience. But we'll talk about later how I feel about this in reality. So they're looking at the notes. They had taken a pause down in the tunnels, and they're looking at the notes from Scar's brother and trying to figure some things out. And Marco is reading this term, Rasayana, and he says, what does that mean? Scar says it's a miracle drug used for longevity. And Marco is like, is that like the Philosopher's Stone? Like, is it the same thing? It says here, it can transform all metals into gold and restore youth to the elderly. And what does this term mean? Aurelian? So anybody who reads Cradle is aware that the Aurelius Empire and the Aurelian people are a thing in that. And I have to assume that like he may have gotten that from this because he is definitely a big like anime fan. Also there is, and also like Will White, who wrote the Cradle series, I'm covering another series of his as well, the Elder Empire, which is really good. But there is an Aurelian Empire, totally different universe, but he couldn't resist using the name again. And I am just going to go ahead and assume that that was like from this, that this was a very purposeful reference he was making. It doesn't really matter, but you know. So he's like, the whole thing turns out to be that that was a term used for gold. And May mentions, I think Mr. Scar's brother was influenced by Xingxi's alchemy, because we refer to an immortal as a shinhito. It means a true being, and they are considered to be perfect souls. And since gold is considered the perfect metal, these beings are also sometimes called Aurelian. So in other words, an immortal being is seen as a golden being. And then May says it comes from the man who supposedly brought alchemy to Xing. The legend says he was an immortal with golden hair and eyes, and that's where the term first originated. And Winry, just as like a bit of a haha, says golden hair and eyes sounds like Ed and Al. And we have this moment where we see Hohenheim like walking away from the camera with his solemn face like he always has, because he carries the weight of millennia. So yeah, I just really enjoyed that bit of just an offhand comment from her. It felt like the kind of thing that happens on this show, like especially when I have a co-host. Somebody will just offhand mention something as being kind of like, oh, that's funny, blah, blah, blah. And they really do think it's just either a coincidence or just a cute callback, and they haven't put together that yes, that's the whole thing. Oh my God. You know, it's like Rashawn in one of the very, very first episodes of Harry Potter, just throwing out into the fucking universe. What was Snape like in love with Harry's mom or something? It was like episode 3. And she just, that's funny, and just says it. And I was just like, I can't. What? Let's see. B. Moore says, no, it's more of a common root than a direct reference. Aurelia is Latin for gold, hence the chemical symbol AU. Aurum is Latin for gold. Aurelia is a root derived from that, means golden person. I still could see. That may be, and that's fine. It might not be a direct reference, but I could still see it being a direct reference, because Will White seems like the type to just be like, "Yo, what's up, guys?" You know, especially if you've ever read the like, what's the word? Bloopers at the end of the book. He is very aware of what he's doing sometimes, and it's pretty great. Erica says Rashawn is great for that. Yeah, she will definitely just pick something out and just randomly mention it. And you're sitting there like, you know, biting your hand, just like, oh, don't say anything, don't say anything. So anyway, they have put all of this together, and then they find the exit, and they manage to make it out of the mines into the sun and the cold. The blizzard is over, and they are making their way to Fort Briggs, when all of a sudden Winry hears this like yell, and Yoki falls into the snow. Like, he doesn't realize that it's as deep as it is. So he takes a step forward thinking that there's going to be solid ground like a foot or so in, and instead just falls in up to his waist. That is one of those things that I have never lived anywhere as an adult with snow deep enough to have that happen, but I definitely had that happen as a kid, and it is so alarming. But yeah, that's what wound up happening to Al, except he's upside down, so only his foot is showing. And Winry comes to dig him out of the snowbank, and he has to explain to them, I was sent to follow you and give you a warning. Briggs has been completely taken over, and Armstrong has been brought down to central headquarters. So that whole place is a bad zone for y'all. We don't need you just walking in there and thinking that you're going to be helped. And they're all like, okay, well, if we can't go there, then where the fuck are we supposed to go? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but we're in a fucking wasteland. It's just snow. And finally, Scar mentions that there is a town. It's a mountain village called Azbek nearby. And it turns out it's like a secret area for refugees. And this is just, it's not even like really secret. It just doesn't seem like many people know about it. And when they're like, really? You want to go there? Because he says they've taken up residence in the slums. Everybody's sort of like, I don't know about this. Except for Yoki, who immediately says, great idea, sir. Let's get going. I can't get over this turnaround. Yoki's whole attitude. He is out here, like, first of all, when they get outside of the door of the mine, when they like first step outside, he says, all right, now everyone follow me. And he is ready to take charge, but there's no sense of, he doesn't seem to be doing this in a way that he did in the past, where there was a real like superiority complex and gross entitlement. It just feels like he's somebody going, I know how to do this and I'm going to handle it in a very sort of, I don't know, there's something so sincere about it, you know, and earnest. That's the word I want. He feels very earnest. And so Scar being like, okay, we're going to go this way. A part of me was expecting Yoki to be kind of mad that he was really put in a position with some power in a way and able to like show off a skill that he has and help everybody using it. And that maybe he'd feel sidelined at the fact that now they were about to head somewhere he didn't even know about. And instead, he's the first one being like, yeah, okay, that's what we're going to do. And backing Scar up when for like the most part, he has argued and complained about most of the things that Scar has done or made him do. So I can't tell if that's just him growing more secure in himself, because it's easier to pump other people up when you feel good about yourself. Or if it's just him being like so desperate because he was the one that really was like, well, we have nowhere to go. Maybe it's just sheer relief that they have someplace that they can head. I don't know. But he's a lot less reticent about it than the two Chimera guys, because they are like when you stop and think about the role that they've played in things, I could see it being a little bit more ticklish for them to be amongst Ishvalans, a people that, you know, their military that they are members of actively tried to eradicate from the planet. Whereas Yoki is just some dude who was exploiting people in a real, regular, everyday sort of way. So he's not going to have that kind of baggage. And maybe that's all it is as well. April says maybe he got a confidence boost feeling so helpful and needed in the mines. Yeah, that's the vibe. I think that's it. I think that he just was like, he doesn't feel a petty jealousy over this because he really is just happy to have contributed something. And it feels a little abrupt because we haven't really spent that much time with Yoki. And the fact that his whole storyline was sort of cut from the beginning of the series, it just sort of undermined things. So I feel like I would appreciate this a little bit more as a build if we were allowed to see a bit more of it. And maybe in the manga, that is something that gets explored a little bit more. I don't know. Damien says, holy crap, I made it. Hi, Damien. So, okay. They are headed towards this refugee camp. And Al and Winry are talking. And Winry is like, isn't Kimblee going to be like, isn't he going to be suspicious over the fact that you have disappeared? And then we see there is just some dude in identical armor to Al's. I am going to assume this was like a creation of alchemy, that he was able to just build this suit, right? I don't know, but that's my assumption. It's fine. And they have this regular dude in here who's trying to imitate Al's voice. Y'all, there is nothing that I love as much as when a character in something has to imitate another character. It is just one of those things that you just chef's kiss, It's because it's so revealing. It's revealing about the character they are imitating, because you get to see what not only other characters focus on about that person, but what the author thinks we would notice, or that character would notice. So we're getting a bit of information also about the character playing them, imitating them, because what is it that they would zero in on? What are the particular odd quirks that they would be like, why do you do that? Why do you say that? Why, And that's something that I find really fun. It just tells you a lot about people, and in both directions, So anyway, this dude is just like, yes, brother, this really high-pitched voice. And when he says that, Kimblee turns in such a way. And again, I can't tell how much he has figured out. Kimblee knows that they are going to try and assassinate him. He knows that there are snipers. He knows that this whole thing is just like a setup, and he's figuring out how it's a setup. But whether he has put together that that's not Al and that there's like a whole other thing going on, I can't tell. He definitely knows something is up. There's no question for me about that. He is aware things are hinky. But as for how much of it he has started to really put together, I can't get an idea. He's like, the camera turns to him at certain times, or he turns his head and looks at things in a certain way that it can feel like, oh yeah, that's him like putting two and two together. Or it could just be him noticing something that feels a little bit off and is making him go, yeah, something, I can't decide. If we find out in the end that he knew everything that was going on, I wouldn't really be mad at that, because as great a plan as these guys are putting together, considering the options that they have had, it's not watertight, and they're not doing like an amazing job at it. They're doing a good job, but it by no means do I feel like it is above being found out. So anyway, this dude is struggling in this armor as well, which I feel like could definitely get noticed. It doesn't wind up being an issue because like the whole thing with Kimblee blows up literally and figuratively. But yeah, these guys that he's getting into position to take down Kimblee is fully aware of, and is just like, yeah, I could feel the intent all around, which I thought was like a really interesting way to put it. So, and this guy who is positioned in this window, he's saying he's in my sights. Should I go for it? And then he sees Ed walk up and start talking to him. And this is interesting because Kimblee is interpreting this as Ed buying time for his friends to get into position so that they can take him out. And what Ed's actually doing, I think, is getting close enough that it might potentially be kind of an issue for them to take a shot at Kimblee. And he's encouraging Kimblee to go and search those tunnels himself because he sends his two guys away. And let's see. Oh, wait. No, maybe he says you should send the soldiers to do it. Yeah, he sends them and initially is apparently going to follow. And Ed is telling him not to do that. So I don't know. I thought initially that he was telling him to go into the tunnels and like to get out of the line of fire of the sniper. But maybe that isn't what he was up to here. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how Ed would have worked this if he could. B. Morris says, to be fair, Ed is being pretty calm considering a serial killer has kidnapped his girlfriend, not really selling it. Yeah, agreed. Like the whole way that they are handling this, they're doing their best, but it's not really, it's all fishy. It just all feels really fishy, you know? So yeah, this is when he's like, oh yeah, so those snipers. And Ed folding immediately. Guys, if somebody just like tells you, oh, are you trying to kill me? I don't care if you are really trying to kill them. You don't just go, I can't believe you figured out I was trying to kill you. Ed, buddy, what are you doing? He just immediately shows all of his cards. He is not good at this. So at this point, Miles is like, yeah, take the shot. And the guy lifts his gun and is about to do it when all of a sudden Kimblee raises both hands into the air, slams them into the ground, and it turns out he has caused this huge cloud of snow in order to obscure their vision and take off and hide in a certain building. Except he takes off to hide and then turns and looks directly at Ed. So he's not even like really trying to hide. He's trying to lure Ed because he knows that his guys are right there. And Ed goes running after him, completely taking the bait. And these dudes step in front of him and transform into their Chimera selves and begin to beat the shit out of him. And then we have the jump to him looking down, him being Kimblee, and seeing all of the footprints in town heading into the mines. And he realizes, oh, that's our friends. So this is something that I was like curious about because he sees the footsteps, but I thought there had been a blizzard. I don't know if maybe the timing of this is just something that I kind of got wrong, but I really would have thought that the footsteps of all of our friends going into the mine would have been covered up and gone at this point. Unless these are supposed to be the footsteps from when they came out of the mine, but then he wouldn't go toward the mine if he's trying to track them down, right? It would be him. I don't know. B. Moore says, not sure if this is intended to be anything, but it's funny that Kimblee basically stole Scar's move of detonating the ground to make a smoke screen. Yeah, I thought of that too, that it's like the exact same move. And also, just for the record, I am still a little bit unclear with like how the specializations in alchemy work, because like, you know, Ed deals with metal a lot of the time, but it's not like he can't work with other materials as well. And yet it's been said by you guys that metal is like the one that he is best at, I think. I don't know if it's best or that it's just the one that he prefers, but I feel like you guys have suggested that it's the one he's best at. And Kimblee, I've been sort of like thinking of him as somebody who specializes in fire, but then I realized that I haven't actually seen like fire. I've seen explosions, and that's not really the same thing. So is it like this could just be him doing the explosion thing, but because he's directed it down into a pile of snow, it has a different effect than it did when he, for example, like blew up a town or blows up a building later. But I just wanted to mention that because like the whole way that alchemy works in this world gets a little bit muddled for me because I forget like a variety of factors about how it works. And also in the Discord, somebody pointed out to me something that I keep re-remembering and forgetting again, which is that you aren't born an alchemist. You can study to become an alchemist, and anybody can do it if they study it and figure it out, which that is such a rare thing in stories for a like particular set of magical abilities to be accessible to anybody who chooses to pursue a study in that area. It's the kind of thing that I can't imagine living in a world like that where you could do those things and not being interested in learning how to do it. The idea that people would ever turn it down and just be like, no, I think I'll just become a baker. I mean, maybe if it was as like routine a thing to have in your world as it seems to be, it wouldn't be that impressive to you anymore. Or it feels like something completely out of your wheelhouse. Like I could learn how to program and run computers and hack into the software of the IRS and remove my tax debt. But I haven't because I don't give a shit about doing that. Maybe that's all it is. It's that simple. B. Moore says, Kimblee's alchemy is kind of weird. It seems like it's not a specific material, but transmuting explosions itself. Okay, see, that was the vibe I was getting. Okay, good. The sun and moon symbols on his palm are supposed to be representing something about unstable energy, I think, like bringing a positive and negative charge together. Huh. Interesting. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, I did. I had forgotten to mention about the fact that he has a symbol transmutation circles on each of his hands, that it's not just one, but I am very I'm okay with the fact that I don't really understand how alchemy works. There are some stories where if you don't get the system of magic, for example, if I didn't understand how it worked in Cradle, that would be a problem because so much relies on you understanding the progression of things and how it could go. But in this world, I feel like it doesn't matter as much to me. The alchemy feels, I don't want to say it just feels secondary, but it feels like it's a co-pilot to the main plot. And it's not like the point of things, if that makes sense. So anyway, these two dudes are tossing Ed around, and he winds up going over this ledge and dropping into what seems like a sort of basement area. And this is where he finds the dynamite. And the two Chimera guys drop in after him, Chimeras, and Ed has picked up some dynamite. And one of them says, it's not going to do you any good, it's too wet. And he says, do you know what dynamite's made of? And I love this because these two dudes are being asked a question that they could just attack him anyway. But no, they do stop and think about the question. It's nitroglycerin, isn't it? And nitroglycol, and there's sawdust. Isn't there ammonium nitrate in there too? And Ed says, yeah, and what's ammonium nitrate made out of? That's easy, nitric acid and ammonia. And Ed turns around, and he's got nose plugs in, and both these guys yell ammonia And then there is an explosion of what appears to be pure ammonia to render their sense of smell useless so that they can't continue to pursue him in low visibility. I can't understand what Ed did here, because it feels like the suggestion is he pissed all over the dynamite because of the way that he's crouching and he has his back to them. Like, granted, most guys don't crouch when they're peeing, but I couldn't tell whether the show would do, like, what is he just, is it supposed to be that he's just taking the dynamite apart and using certain pieces of, like, because how would that even work? It just really felt to me like there was a piss joke being made in here somewhere. And because of the ammonia thing. And I don't know if that is just because I'm stuck on that because my cat pees everywhere and it's just an ammonia smell that slowly eats away at my soul. But guys, what is it that Ed was supposed to have done here? Okay. Erica says the ammonium was already there and he just separated it and diffused it in the air. Oh, B. Moore says Ed deconstructed the dynamite to release ammonia. Ammonia smells horrendous. So, yeah, no, I get the point of it. So it's just supposed to be that he used alchemy to pull only the ammonia out of the dynamite. Why did he have his back to them when he did that? I don't, like, it just felt like they were trying to say something with his back being to, and him doing something like hidden. If that were all he was doing, he could have just done that right in front of their face because they were still just trying to figure out what he was even up to. So that just adds or maybe it was supposed to be that he turned his back so that he could put nose plugs in and be prepared for the smell. Maybe that's all it is. It's supposed to be that he couldn't tip his hand by showing them he was about to do something smell based. All right. Well, I thought that there was like a lot more happening there than it turns out there was. So it's fine. But yeah, Kimblee walks in at this point and is like, what is that smell? And Ed is like, ha ha. And Kimblee says, your attitude's changed a lot since I lost my hostage. And this should be Ed's like chance to try and protest, and because what Kimblee is saying is basically, oh, it's weird how Winry's not with me anymore and you're acting real different now when she's still allegedly in danger. But it's Ed doesn't seem to be really picking up on what it is Kimblee's saying here, that he has started to figure out the other parts of this whole thing. And Ed says, all I want you to do is tell me everything you know. And when he said that, I started laughing, and I was so glad that Kimblee follows it up with, oh, is that all you want from me? Thank you, Kimblee. The whole like, oh, nothing, no problem, dude. All I want is for you to spill every secret you've got. Mm-hmm. Sir. He's saying this too. Kimblee is still fully operational. And Ed is acting like he's won and has really got Kimblee up against a wall. And I'm like, how have you not seen the way this man operates? This is nothing. You haven't got the drop on him at all, actually. Look at the way he reacted when he saw that both his men were down. Did he seem panicked to you? No. He's fine. But Ed is very confident for like no good reason. B. Moore says it was just body language to show him being devious for humor. And Erica says drama. And then Michael says so they couldn't see the nose plugs. All right. All kinds of theories here. It's fine. once I found out what it was he did, it was just a little bit of a letdown when I thought that it had something to do with him peeing on things, I have to admit. But anyway, so Kimblee is like, all right, I guess I'll have to speed things up because I don't want to deal with getting beat up by a child. And he pulls out the crystalline Philosopher's Stone, the one that he used initially in Ishval. And Ed is just like, fuck you, and attacks. And Kimblee is genuinely taken off guard by how fast Ed is. And they begin to fight. Kimblee drops the stone and it goes like down a mine shaft. And then Ed slices Kimblee's hand. And again, has a moment of really thinking that he won. And Kimblee is like, dude, the thing is, you think you're being merciful, but you're just giving me another chance to kill you. And as he says this, the camera pans up and we see his eyes glowing red, and he sticks his tongue out, and the other Philosopher's Stone, the round one, falls out of his mouth into his hand, and he uses it again for a transmutation of an explosion. It's a little frustrating because allegedly this kind of explosion, using a Philosopher's Stone to like fuel it, you would really expect it would kill everybody around. And it doesn't. It feels like the same thing that he did in Ishval, which is supposedly it killed a whole town, you know. Now, granted, I don't think he's trying to make the radius that wide because I think he realizes it would be a problem if literally everybody with him died. But I really would have expected there to be at least like a couple casualties, like if one of the Chimera guys had actually died. But never mind. It's, oh my God. Michael in the chat says he should have had a stuffed nose voice then. Do you know what did it? About ya. Oh my God. Honestly, that would have been really funny. They should have done that. I agree completely, Michael. However, despite the fact that there weren't any casualties like I would have preferred, we do have a moment of real injury from Ed because he is looking around at the wreckage of the place and tries to stand up, and he really thinks that he can. And then he looks down and realizes that he has been impaled. Serious bleeding. It's blood coming out of his mouth. It's pooling on the ground underneath him. This is very, very real. It's a piece of rebar, basically, that has like gone through his side. And the two Chimera are waking up and looking around like, what the fuck did Kimblee do? And Ed collapses, and we cut from there to Winry. But when we cut back to Ed, he's thinking to himself, I'm not going to make her cry, especially over something this stupid. And I could not help but laugh. I'm like, dude, the Crimson Alchemist blew up a building and you got impaled on rebar. I wouldn't call this stupid. Like, Ed, be reasonable here, you know? Look, I admire you deciding to try and persevere anyway. I have no problem with that aspect. But he's trying to act like he just got in a little fender bender in the Target parking lot. It's like, my guy, you are bleeding out of your mouth from internal injuries. Just, I don't know, cool it a little bit. But before we had gone to that, Winry turns and sees Al drop face down into the snow with no warning. And he's saying, I'm being pulled back again. And they're asking him what he means. And all of a sudden, he sees his body again. And he says, my body is pulling my soul. And he goes back down. And they can't get any response out of him. And everybody is like, do you guys know what's happening? Have you ever heard of this like occurring before. And we pretty much like, I mean, we're left here with them all just saying, what do we do? And that's where things get left with them. And it's very, very, it's very upsetting to me. What's happening with Al? Like, is it possible that he actually, I don't want to say dies, because like, so his soul is in his armor. His body is in the void. His body is calling on his soul. It doesn't feel like it's purposeful either. It feels sort of like this is what's happening because you've been apart for so long. It's not like his body is going, come here, soul. More like this is just sort of what winds up happening. If his body manages to pull his soul, would that count as him dying? Is the void death? Or would he just exist there instead from now on in a weird way that isn't like the norm? I'm really curious about what would even happen, you know? But anyway, so we go back to Ed. This is when he's like, I'm not letting her cry for something as stupid as this. And then the two Chimera come upon him and he asks for their help. And they're like, dude, we were just fighting and we kicked the shit out of you and like you fell off a roof. And now you want me to help save your life? And to his credit, Ed just says, yeah, basically. Yep. And he wants them to pull it out. And they're like, okay, thing is, you'll definitely bleed to death if we do that. And Ed says, not if I heal it. I did some research on it when I tried human transmutation. So he's basically going to attempt this really risky thing based purely on research. He's a real Hermione Granger. It's basically, I understand the theory behind it. And what, you know, this works for me because as much of a risk as that is, it's that or just bleed to death here. Like, if he doesn't try anything, he isn't making it out of this abandoned mineshaft. So, yeah, you know, I guess you may as well give it a fucking shot. So, yeah, Ed says I'm going to have to use some of my own life force to fuel it the way I would a philosopher's stone. And it'll probably take a few years off my lifespan. Which is really interesting and a little sudden. I really would have liked if there was more of like if we had gotten a little bit more of a precedent that this could be done, not even necessarily seeing it happen on screen, but maybe they deciphered like enough of Scar's brother's notes to get a suggestion that this is something that could be done. It just feels like quite a leap to make that this is possible. And if it is something that Ed had read about being possible, I would like to know more about it beforehand. You know what I mean? It just felt like kind of a jump. It's not a big deal, but I just wanted to mention it. And yeah, he says, oh, that's right. They're asking, are you sure? And he says, I don't have time to think about it. If this is really what showing mercy is going to cost me, then I'm going to have to pay the price, right? Which I guess he's saying I have to like use some of my life force and lose years of my life to fix an injury that I wouldn't have if I did just kill Kimblee. Which I guess that is like, I would argue that he wouldn't have been able to just kill Kimblee to begin with. Like, he's just not a match for Kimblee from what I have seen. He's fast. That's impressive to Kimblee, but I don't know about the rest of it. That said, though, if he were able to kill Kimblee, this is reasonable. So yeah, the dude who looks like a lion is like, all right, well, it sounds like you're sure, so let's do it. And Ed is trying to sort of meditate on the concept of imagining himself as a single mass of energy, as part of everything. And he's having to keep that in mind while this dude pulls the rebar out of his torso. Honestly, that's very impressive. Just the whole concept of I am needing to keep concentration on this extremely esoteric, theoretical, conceptual process while suffering probably one of the most painful injuries he has ever had, outside of maybe losing his arm and leg. But even that, it seemed almost like those were done very neatly in a way. But it begins to work. He's exuding that sort of alchemy lightning. And the guys are watching and think they think he's died. They both sort of hang their heads because Ed seems to slump in a way that signals he's dead. And then he opens his eyes and says, "You can't kill me that easily." And they're like, "Wait, did you do it?" And Ed says, "I rejoined my undamaged organs." I thought that was weird. And it might be that this is I rejoined my undamaged organs. Well, that feels like it has to be a weird thing with the translation, because if they're undamaged, or is he just talking about the arteries and stuff between them? Is that what he means? Maybe just the connection instead. But yeah, and I managed to stop the bleeding, but it won't last for long. So because I would have thought he would have at least healed some of the organs, but I guess not. It's just the connection between them being the blood flow. All right, that makes sense to me. It's just so I want to know more about exactly how he imagines this. How does he know that's what he did? I want to know more about the process behind this, because there's a sense of real awareness of what he's working on within his body when he does it, but we don't really get to see that process. And I would have kind of liked to, instead of seeing the rebar being pulled out of his torso covered in blood, maybe have something when we go into the void with him and we see what the void looks like, seeing the way he views his body as he's trying to fix the injuries. Because I'd like to have a little bit more of a first-hand experience of what he's doing instead of just being told by him after he's done it already. Especially considering it's not something that he has done before. So him being able to really specifically quantify what he did when it's a brand new thing he's never done feels a little bit less interesting and less likely. But yeah, so anyway, it doesn't matter, but he's admitting this is definitely a temporary thing. And when they say, well, then, okay, we'll bring you to a real doctor, he says that he doesn't have time for that. I've got to stop Kimblee before he gets to them. But he stumbles 5 steps before just falling on his face again. And these two dudes are just man, I get it. And I understand this urgency, but you are not going to be able to fight him like this. Look at you. And then one of them notices something, and it's the Philosopher's Stone, the first one, the crystal sort of one, that he dropped in the beginning of the fight. And I love one of them says, Mr. Kimblee must have dropped it. And he says, Mr. Kimblee? Stop calling him that. He fucking left us here to die. Fuck that guy. And another dude's all right, no, yeah, that's fair. So they decide they're going to let Kimblee think they died. And then they're looking down at Ed. We can't just leave him here to die. We do owe him our lives, after all. And one of them picks him up piggyback. And they carry him and say, we've got to find him a doctor. And I am absolutely dying for them to just put the Philosopher's Stone in his hand and wake him up. I don't know if he would know what to do with it, but considering that he was able to somehow like utilize his own life force, I think he'd figure it out. I don't know what doctor they can bring him to that it isn't going to be a big problem for him. That's really my concern here, is like where specifically are they going to take him that isn't going to like slow everything down even worse? And the one guy, the gorilla looking guy, he put the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket. They both, him and the other dude, know that he has it. As far as I can tell, Ed was completely unconscious and doesn't know he has it. So is he going to give it to the doctor? Is he going to like, is he aware of the potential for using it to completely heal? The fact that he knew Kimblee had it at all leads me to think he is somewhat aware of its abilities. But yeah, it is a really, there's a lot of potential here, and I'm really curious what happens if they use it to heal Ed. Is he going to have a sense of all of the deaths that were caused to create the stone sort of in his body the way Hohenheim does? If he uses that to save his own life, like, will that affect him at all? I don't know. The fact is that Hohenheim is a Philosopher's Stone, is the way that he puts it. That basically all of that power got like infused into him as a being, a person. But it doesn't seem like when he uses his ability to heal, at least partially heal, Ed and Al's old teacher, Izumi is her name, that she is like negatively affected by it. So I don't know if that's like a real 1-to-1 ratio kind of comparison that I can make, but maybe it wouldn't have that effect. Look, Ed's been through enough. What I'm saying is if this can heal him, I just don't want it to have other consequences, because for God's sake, give him a break, you know? Also, it hadn't really occurred to me, but we haven't, obviously for very good reason, checked in with Havoc for a long time. And I was so devastated because he's like paralyzed. And now that we've got the introduction of the Philosopher's Stone to heal enormous injuries, I'm just saying I have high hopes. I'm hoping that maybe we can, Havoc can, it's one of two things. One, we figure out that we can heal Havoc with this somehow and he's fine. Or conversely, a terrible option, he gets lured onto the bad side because they are like, oh, we can heal you. All you need to do is sign these papers and give us your consent for this injection and we'll do it for you. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to pass up when somebody's offering you to like give your mobility back to you, you know? So anyway, that's where my mind went. I was thinking about that the other day and I just wanted to mention it because you guys know, I have a little crush on Havoc. It's fine. It's no big deal. I have it under control. So yeah, that is the end of the episode, is these dudes walking down the tunnel carrying Ed. And they're talking about taking him to a doctor. So I had better wrap up. But thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate everybody participating and everything. Thank you, Max, for commissioning this. I can't believe it. Like, I've only got like 20 something episodes left. It's been so consistent, you know, the coverage for this, that once it's over, it's going to feel really weird. That always happens when I wrap something up that's been very steady. Anyway, okay. Thank you guys again. And hopefully I will see you on Friday. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.